Today's lecture is Structuralism School of Thought. Founder is William Wundt. Founder of the Structuralism, William Wundt is the founder and father of the Structuralism, and he established the psychological laboratory in Germany in 1879, and he separated this psychology from the discipline of the philosophy. First, it was introduced under the same discipline. Formulated the basic idea of the structuralism. Wundt formulated very basic idea of the structuralism, and student of the Wundt was Tancher. Tancher was the student of Wundt who explained the further ideas of Wundt. William Wundt established the psychology as a separate science by founding his first laboratory. He separated this as a separate science. At first, it was under the philosophy. It was taught. It was introduced under the philosophy, but with the time, it was introduced as a separate science. And for the experimental study of the consciousness, focused to the study of the consciousness in psychological laboratory. The psychological laboratory was established just for the study of the consciousness, to do the experiment of the consciousness, how the consciousness exists, and how the consciousness is, and what is the formulation of the, and there are structures through which the consciousness takes place. And the concept of the structuralist school of thought and psychologists were that there is a certain structure of the mind through which the mind works, through which the consciousness works, and focus the fundamental elements of the thinking, the fundamental elements of thinking. What are the fundamental elements of thinking? How, from where the thinking take place? Emotions, consciousness, and other mental activities, other kind of the mental activities, emotions, thinking, perceptions, perceiving an object. What are the fundamentals of the mind? How the separate structures of the mind formulate the situation, deals with the situation, and to solve the problems. Was interested to study the building blocks of the mind. The Wundt, who was interested to study the building blocks of the mind. What are the building blocks of the mind? Initial building blocks or started building blocks of the mind. And the introspection method was introduced by the Wundt. What they mean by introspection means self-analyze, to report your own experiences, analyze yourself. And let's suppose in introspection method some objects or images are given to explain them, to describe them within your own words, and to reflect your own experiences regarding, through which you analyze yourself, that how much experience do you have about an object or the environmental situations which you deal with. And components of the consciousness, according to the structuralism school of thought of psychology, there are separate elements which contributes to build the consciousness of the mind. According to them, consciousness is something, the structure. If I talk any object, if I talk book, pen, or an object of the environment, then definitely the structure of that object comes in your mind. So for this, they have stated the structure of the mind, structure of the consciousness, structure of the or basic building blocks of the mind. And there are element of perception. According to the structuralists, there is an area by which you perceive the objects through your senses, how you perceive the environment through your senses, how you touch, see, sight, smell, sound the environmental objects. Element, what are your mind and setup of the element of perception in your mind, which creates the senses, and which create the senses about an object, how you test, how you observe, how you experiment an object while seeing, while touching, while hearing, while smelling. So this is some components of the consciousness which build a structure in the mind. And another element, an element of emotion or state, it deals that how you have emotion about an object, either you have joy, love, sadness, how you deal with the situations, how the problem you are facing with joy, you with your angerness, with sadness, or an object that is a human, what do you have perceptions and what kind of the emotions you keep, either positive or negative. So this also built a structure in your mind by which the further mind works. Element of idea also contributes to the structuralism, to building the structure of the mind, by which how you perceive, how realistic captured, how you know this is real, how you realistically you perceive, you gain objects, you think about objects, how. So structuralism school of thought is focused on the structure of the mind, not to the function. There are certain structures in the mind through which the human consciousness begin to work. There are characteristics of the element, quality, intensity. The characteristics is quality of element. Element were the perception, emotion, idea. So what are the basic characteristics? Quality, how you distinguish the objects. Intensity, dimensions, how louder, brighter an object is, a situation is, a problem is. According to that you create a structure in your mind. Duration, what is the time period of the situation, time period of the problem which you were with, the time over. Clearness, how much the attention and consciousness you have about an object or problem, by which that you develop the elements, and elements develop the consciousness. Strength of the structuralism is school of thought that it is the first major psychology, major thought of psychology. So first, and structuralism, a school of thought, is influenced to develop for the experimental psychology. This was the structuralism, and next we will be discussing the functionalism school of thought in psychology.